Hello and good evening, and welcome to the 66 RPG Think Tank, where we do lots of brainstorming about, I don't know, RPG stuff. This week we're going to be talking about the magic of convenience, about how in a magical world there would be magic which just makes life a bit easier. You know, it's not always about blowing shit up. So before we get on to that, let's do some check-ins, and Emma's going to do the check-in. So, hello, Em.
Hello. I've had a very busy few weeks. I've enrolled back into college part-time. I've been doing some commissions for a local feature film and doing lots and lots and lots of felting. So over to Jay. How's your week been?
My week, now that you can actually hear me, my week's been really quite good. I've got an awful lot of work done. Little bit mixed though. I handed my notice in on Monday. So, yeah, 3 months more at where I'm currently working, and then I'm going to be living in Hong Kong. So, lots of travels ahead.
Over to you, Mark.
Yeah, well, mixed. Been working in production for building the detectors for going out, and yeah, getting all that out of the way. But that's been stalled and halting, but we're getting there with that. So overall, pretty good. Oh, and I turned 30 last Saturday. Had a quite nice birthday party at the Vote Festival.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Over to Chris.
I've had a good week, good productive week, just about finished all the updates to the PDFs, and more importantly, look what I've got. Woo! Hey, it is a print copy of the Road to Petra. All how many pages did we come to? 80 pages in the end. I really must learn to write less. But yeah, it looks fantastic. I'm really pleased with how it's come out. I'm ordering new proof copies of all the PDFs, hopefully on Monday or Tuesday, and then once I get those, we will go to print. So yeah, good week, good chief stuff, and got book. So I like this week.
Yeah. Finally, over to Mr. King.
Yeah, I've had I've had a very good week. I've got some art back for my comic, so it looks like that might actually be happening, which is amazing for me. So I've never actually had anything I wrote actually happen. I found there's a free bookshop in Derby, and I found a copy of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas in the horror section. That's my story of the week.
Okay, and with that, we'll go over to Chris to.
Thank you, Em. Oh, some big news this week. I'm going to have to interrogate Jay afterwards about his travels to Hong Kong, because that sounds like it's going to be an adventure. But anyway, let's talk about the magic of convenience. So this came out of sort of last week's brainstorming, where we just said, give us some spells, and some of the spells we got were, you know, they weren't combat magic. They were just interesting things which would change people's lives, you know, and things, as you think about a magical world, but not just going to use magic for combat, you know, any more than we use steel just for combat, you know, making weapons. So this week we asked about magic of convenience. What magic spells would exist to make a wizard's life easier or generally change the world? And we put this out on Reddit, and we got a fantastic response. Reddit, we love you. So we're going to talk about that. So we're going to start off with Jay, who's picked out a spell called Official Measure.
Yeah, this one's come from the Reddit user Ash Lykos. This is kind of just an interesting little one. What he's done, he's come up with a set of 4 spells. I'll just do Official Measure to start with. But he's come up with a set of spells that are very much in the vein of the clerk and the bureaucrat and the paper pusher. But the spells I think you can have an awful lot of fun with by working with them. Now, Official Measure is basically you touch a quantity of material, and then or basically by touching it, you then hear an ethereal voice in tone the exact amount of it. So, for example, and it will tell you, well, if you touch like a pig, it would tell you this pig weighs this many units so this many kilos, it's roughly this long, and it has this much of volume. But it's really a kind of way to, I mean, as Ash Lycos says, you will never get shortchanged in the market again. You'll always know exactly how many have you got in your stock. And also, quite an interesting one, if you're the kind of character who's going to be doing a potion casting or potion making, then being able to know exactly how much of any of your reagents you've got is going to be very useful. So that's a nice little idea I've got. I mean, it would work. Yeah, it's a neat little spell that's going to have an awful lot of little amusing uses. Like, well, I need to know how much of this I've actually got. And now I know.
Yeah, I mean that's a really sort of like sensible use of magic, because I mean if you look at the history of weight and measure, and I don't think it's exaggerating. Like wars have been fought over what is a definition, or that someone shortchanged me, and all sorts of strange things happened about how do you define a measure historically. So that is, yeah, I like that one because it really would make a magical world, rather than sort of a shopkeeper weighing stuff out. They would just grab a handful and go, instantly know there's 27 pounds of it, or 27 grams or whatever. So yeah, I like that one, Jay. Okay, so on a sort of similar note, I think, Pat, you've got something called Memory Bank.
Yes, Memory Bank is by a user called Subcollector. He collects subs. It's basically something you can summon it up, and it's essentially a magical dictaphone. You can bring this thing up, you tell it to remind you about something, and then later on it repeats it to you. Or you tell it something you want to remember, and so if you've got something like, say, a password that you need to remember, tell it to your memory bank. If you've got I don't know, you need to know which direction to take in that little fork in Moria, or whatever. You tell your memory bank, and it remembers it for you, so you don't have to.
Yeah, as someone with a bad memory, that certainly would be on my spell list. And I do sometimes wonder when you watch these films and things like that, and someone will shout out an address or whatever, and no one has any problems remembering it. No one goes, "What did he say?" And I'm just writing it down, So yeah, it's something magical to help you remember. I like that, but it is sort of tending towards a little bit basically being your PDA, your smartphone. But yeah, certainly magic of convenience. Jay, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, just a quick one. What would happen if someone tried to steal your memory bank?
Yeah, that would be it. That's actually sort of a whole adventure seed, isn't it? And yeah, you could just. I suppose it just works like a book, isn't it? If someone stole your diary or your notes from an adventure, then it becomes a source for a new adventure. So yeah, that would be a useful one. Though I suppose with magic, if you've cast it, it's going to be more tied to the person who made it. So yeah, good idea. Okay, so Mark, something on completely... No, let's go for something vaguely on the same useful, practical things. Money changer.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool, handy spell. Like I say, it's the original, as the poster suggests. Its name is Mike Riller's Condiment. He suggests that the whole point, it just turns coins according to the rules of currency. So you can, let's say, you can change currency depending on where you are versus the coins you have, which can be handy in a game where your GM is actually bothering to make you count currency. But also, it's a useful way to rationalise how a party clears out a dungeon. Gets equivalent to several thousand pieces in gold, but it's all in copper and silver spread over several fights. And then they just boil it all down to gold. So, for example, rather than carrying around 5 tons of copper, you can boil it down just a few platinum coins, then carry that about. But it also gives a way of using that as an alternative, where you take your 5 bits of platinum and fly up above a city, and then just convert it into a few tons of copper from the air, and then bombard a place by dropping metalwork on them that way. So I quite like that one. It's all fairly convenient. It also provides the handy excuse of how can you carry such an absurd amount of money with no weight in games where that happens.
Yes, it's always been a long-standing joke in D&D type games that you you carry vast amounts of coinage, and certainly in old school style gaming, and certainly when I sort of started gaming, you'd quite often have a GM who would give you this 20,000 GP, but it's all in copper, and then insist you work out a way to take it home. It was generally a way of actually the GM trying to stiff the players. So yeah, that sort of magic spell would be quite useful, and I do like the idea of taking 10 platinum pieces up 100 foot above someone and then turning it into copper and dropping it on their heads. That has a certain style to it I like. Right, so so there's been some useful things. Now, what about, we had some really quite, not necessarily silly, but certainly light-hearted suggestions. Pat, you picked out one to do with snacks, I believe.
Yeah, well, I don't think it's particularly silly, but then I haven't eaten anything since lunch. It's Replenish Snacks by a user called Sorites, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. When it's cast on a bowl of nuts or crisps or pork scratchings, it completely replenishes that bowl of snacks with the same food that's already there. You can't. It's not used to make snacks out of thin air, but you can eat your whole way through a bowl of peanuts, and there's only like 1 or 2 or 3 at the bottom. You wave your hand over it, and there's suddenly more peanuts. It's great at parties, that kind of thing. I think it's there's not much more to it than that, but I like the idea of just eternal, constant food.
Yeah, that's a sort of like student wizard spell, isn't it? Yeah, I've been to plenty of parties where that would be extremely useful. And yeah, I was just trying to think of ways you can abuse that. What's the definition of a snack?
Well, if you could work it on beer, you could. I don't know, if you needed to kill a dragon or something, you could take a bowl of nuts to the top of the dungeon and cast it on it and just pour nuts into the dungeon until it's bearing and then suffocates in nuts, or if it has a nut allergy, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I like that. That's a good way of subverting it. So yeah, so not an entirely silly spell, but certainly a lazy fun spell. Very much on that nature. Mark, you've got something called Stick Sight.
Yeah, I was going to finish off. Sorry, one final point with the Replenish Snacks. You can use the way of fighting these by you feed something a nut and then hit Replenish Snacks after it's eaten it, so it then suffocates or dies and bursts as all the nuts kind of grow exponentially inside of it. But the one I was looking at here was Stink Sight. It enables you to see smells. The example that the guy gives in the actual Reddit forum is saying, yeah, it was the dog. So that's the actual one he gives it. That's Good Doc P came up with that one, which I quite liked. But also for stuff like if you're seeing smells, then you can see where decay is. You can track certain monsters much more easily. That if you haven't got someone in the party who has a smell ability or anything like that, certain diseases or anything could be transmitted by gases, which you could then smell, and then you can see that quite handily from using that little spell. But it's quite a nice little thing. It's got quite it's very similar in the original write-up. We're talking about being able to see his farts. But if you extend it a bit, then you can use it as a really quite handy utility spell.
Yeah, it becomes a tracking skill, a spell in certain sense, or diagnostics. It would work very well in the 66 system where you can mix different things together. Because, like you say, if you're doing a healing action, you had someone with a disease, you conclude it in your action, and maybe being able to see the smell it's giving off gives you a clue. Same with tracking or anything like that. So yeah, I like that one. It sort of also fits quite nicely with 66. So that's a good one. Now on the subject of silly spells, there's one I'm going to pick out, which is, I'm going to struggle to pronounce this, Lawson's Legomorphic Legerdemain. Basically, it's a spell which allows wizards to pull rabbits out of hats. This spell will conjure one rabbit which appears in the caster's hand as he withdraws it from a hat. The nearest rabbit is summoned by the spell within a 2-mile radius. If no rabbits exist or nearby, you get a rabbit-shaped cloud of smoke. Which I just, I just liked it because it was very silly. It's a question of, if you have a real magic world, do you have stage magicians? and sort of like, where did the two meet? And it's very silly. So I like that one. But it does go on to suggest that a slightly harder version of the spell. You also, as putting out the rabbit, you also get to pull out some vegetables, potatoes, butter, small pepper shaker, and everything else you need to make a tasty stew, which I think sort of nicely brings that in. Pat, your thoughts on that?
I was just what you said about stage magicians. I really like the idea that you can go on stage and be a really good stage magician, and everyone's calling you a cheater. You're cheating and using real magic. No, I swear, cast detect magic on me or whatever. Yeah, I just thought that was funny.
Thank you. Yeah, it's an interesting world. Yeah, I sort of almost want to now write a little adventure about a stage magician inside a really magical world. Okay, so I think we've done a little bit of silly ones. I think now let's go a little bit more serious again, or at least more practical in some respects. Jay, I think you've got a couple of good, useful ones to do with documents and recording stuff.
Yeah, I just kind of like the ones Ash Lykos came up here. So I'm going to bring together and pair up dictation and copy document that he's put together here. The dictation one is quite nice, actually, in that for the duration of the spell, all words heard within 20 foot line of sight are recorded with attributions from the speakers. Now, this is one of those classic little sneaky things you could easily do. Now, he recommends it could be used for people like courts to make contracts or deals. You can imagine lawyers or merchants using it. But I think it's a very interesting way you could perhaps start looking to it in terms of spies. Because you simply need to get close enough to overhear a meeting, and then you cast. And then you have a perfect record of everything that's been said in the meeting. So I think that's it's an interesting one. It certainly has a lot of options to it. It has the potential to really annoy GMs, though. Because the player could turn around and kind of demand, no, I want the dictated notes. I want this. I want to see what they actually said. I want it minuted. I want the actual scroll. So that could cause a few problems here and there. It's also the kind of thing that you could set off at random or by accident. It'd be an interesting spell to have someone accidentally botch, and suddenly it just starts, now that's in a different language, or now that's on fire, or now you're recording your secret conversation and you left this piece of paper behind. Things like this could be a good one. The copy document is one that would go with this. It's basically saying on the lines of, well, actually, I have this document and I have this document, and I really don't have time to do this by hand. Zoit. And it's another really good example of completely practical magic being put to very good use.
Yeah, that copy document one, it's like a photocopier, isn't it? You put your one hand on one and another one hand on a blank sheet, and now presto, you have a copy. Those two together, particularly the things you were saying about recording everything and spying on people, my immediate thought went towards sort of like the Stasi in Eastern Europe and Eastern Germany and those bureaucratic states, or to ultimate extent Brazil, as in the Terry Gilliam film, where you have huge bureaucracies spying on people, and just an idea of a sort of like traditional fantasy city being run like a Eastern European state, and there's just like masses of basically clerks having to manage all this paperwork. But you've got so many of those spells out there, in public places and things like that, that the just workload it creates is actually far more of a problem than actually not knowing. So that was just sort of like a image popped into my mind. What else practical, useful stuff was there in there? Mark, maybe not so useful, but squeaky shoes.
You cast it on someone, it makes their shoes squeak. It's pretty much what it says on the tin. Yeah, this is Mischief07 came out with this one. It essentially gives people disadvantages to anything to do with being stealthy. Makes their shoes squeak. It just entertained me. It's one of those silly little Joker spells you can put on someone just to annoy people. It reminds me of a Pathfinder game we had the other day where we had one of the characters and some NPCs have essentially trying to annoy each other with magic. So chucking a couple of nuisance but quite minor spells back and forth at each other. And that's the kind of thing you could use this for.
Yeah, it is one of those sort of little irritating spells, isn't it? You know, yeah, I really wouldn't use it because most of the time, if there's someone who could sneak around, you're either trying to kill them or they're part of your team. So probably not that useful. But it ties up actually. There's another spell, Studious Silence. I think Jen Milkman, I think it was, who suggested this one, which is just a way of making silent. And so he suggested it's just like it muffles loud noises around you, so it makes it easier to work or you know, get to sleep. So basically, almost like earplugs, magical earplugs. But it just those two spells, Squeaky Shoes and Studio Silence. I'm wondering actually whether there's a noise magic, you know, path we could do, or you know, being able to manipulate noise and sound might be an interesting way to sort of like take that one and be a very different style of magic user. There's something practical, Jay. What have you got?
Yeah, just picking out another one. Just going to this Bill 4935 has come up with that. It's an interesting idea. Essentially, it's called Lawthorne's Lodgings Locator. I would like to say I do approve of Reddit's alliterative attempts this evening. There's an awful lot of quite pleasing spell names here. But essentially, it takes the form of a ritual. You cast it, and it tells you where the nearest restaurants are. Or public inns that will accept you as a lodger. So you can't obviously determine the quality of it, but you do get a rough idea of where it is, how far away it is, and what the front of the building looks like. So essentially it's the lines of, well, what pub do I want to go to this evening? Or I am in a town I don't know, or I'm lost on the highway, I need to know the nearest one. But one of the things I like about it, at the higher levels, it gets you the menu. It makes
Nice
you,
touch.
so you get the menu. It makes the beds nicer or softer. You can improve the quality of the restaurant or inn you're trying to look for.
So it's sort of like TripAdvisor.
Yeah, pretty much. It's a magical TripAdvisor. So it quite appealed to me, actually. I mean, you could use it for other methods, like, well, I'm stuck in the middle of nowhere, I need to be somewhere nicer, cast the spell. That way is warm, if nothing else.
Yeah, there was just extending to that, whether it's sort of at high levels, it gives you reviews effectively. It says, oh yeah, there's such and such a tavern, great for bar fights, or, you know, such and such a inn, only 3 residents have been assassinated in this inn in the last year. You know, those sort of little tidbits of information could add a lot of colour to a sort of campaign. Mark, yeah, you had another book-related one, Faramir's Almanac.
Yeah, it gives you...
Faramir's.
Sorry, yeah, Faramir's Almanac. The whole point is that it gives you the accurate weather for the next year within 20 miles of yourself. So must be powered with the sacrifice of sweat to grease from someone else's elbow and dreams, apparently. Just that he came up with. This is Thunderchunks come up with this idea.
Love the name.
Whole collection of them all. But yeah, basically it gives you accurate predictions of the weather for the next year around you. So it's if you're doing stuff with like sort of flight magic, for example, or anything along those lines, it's really handy for that kind of work. But also, say if you're doing anything which involves long-term planning, building forests, planting, that kind of thing, done it quite a lot. And just as a kind of honourable mention, there's another one from Thunderchunk's list. Cube of bouillon makes a gallon of water per day into a warm broth, also known as bouillon. But I think we've discussed this before, but it turns much more useful if you can chuck it into any old impure water, anything you like. It turns it into broth. It does say it's available in chicken, beef, and vegetable varieties. But I do like that idea because it's almost like the peanuts thing. You pattern the snack replenishing snacks, but you chuck this thing in, and you've always got food because you've always got this cube with you. Hopefully it's reusable. You have to fish it out. But again, combat uses. You get something to swallow it, turns it into turns its stomach juice or any liquid in it into bouillon, and thus it dies. Or if you're dealing with any kind of thing which lives in water, you just throw cubes of these things at it, and eventually it's not breathing water, it's breathing gravy.
Yes, I like that. Or, chuck it inside a vegetarian and just watch them squirm, yes.
So that's the thing, if you're fighting aboleths in like a Pathfinder game, it's a big evil magical fish thing, you just throw these cubes at it and it all turns into gravy.
Pat, you had a thought on that?
I have to say, I'm struggling to think of a situation where you'd be fighting an evil giant vegetarian. Like,
I think, Jay, you need to add that to your giant chickens adventure. But yeah, okay, it's one of those spells which, under exactly the right circumstances, it's going to be very useful. But I have to say those circumstances are going to be very, very rare. Yes. Okay. So yeah, Pat. Let's wrap this up. I think you've got one Watum's Wand Award. I shudder to ask.
Watum's Wand Award. I believe this is also by Thunderchunks. Yes, it is. It's a useful cantrip. Basically, it allows for physical intimacy with another human being without any of the potential negative side effects. So it stops unwanted pregnancies, it stops venereal diseases, it stops all that kind of nastiness as long as you've got this spell on you. But it's also got he's actually got some rather amusing uses for it, such as casting it on an heir-obsessed noble.
Almost like a curse.
Yeah, exactly. Using it as a curse. I suppose you could get a ransom out of it, or.
Yeah, I think it says something about the audience and that the whole name of it, Watum's Wand Ward, it's very much. I think he also suggests something about it can change the colour of your genital parts or appearance and things like that. It certainly says a very male slant to that spell, but it actually points to something more deeper, because if you had genuinely had a magical society, I think it's pretty good that some female magic users will be looking at things which prevent pregnancy a lot sooner than male magic users would.
All it actually says is it doesn't say anything about. It says it's enhancing dimensions or colour. That doesn't necessarily mean like it's restricted to males. You can enhance the dimensions of a lady part.
Yeah, we won't go there, but I will just leave the question hanging: is why would you want to? But we will move on from that point. I just thought it was an interesting thing, and this is why I like questions about magical societies, is because there's a lot of things you would do in a magical society, such as birth control, which are really, really important and would completely change the shape and society of magic, or completely change the society how it appeared. And it wouldn't just be, we take 14th century England and bug some magic in it. It would look entirely different because the magic would change society, and that is just one of those examples where, small spell would completely change society. Okay, right, we're sort of heading towards time. Has anyone got any more they wish to throw in? Right, we've pretty much picked all our favourites. Certainly picked all of mine. Okay, so that's it for the magical convenience. Thank you very much to Reddit for all your wonderful ideas. They really are some cracking ideas. I like those, and there's some ones which I think I'm tempted to sort of put together into a path for 66 and see what happens. So thank you very much. Okay, so we now move on to the next bit, which is talking about next week, as in what are we going to do next week? Because I hope you guys have some ideas, because I have to say that I haven't got anything off the top of my head. Mark?
I think try and develop some of these into paths and some kind of spells or something that we can make use of within 66, because we've got a lot of good material off Reddit now from this. The people that obviously have done a wonderful job, so it'd be nice to turn that into some material which we can then kind of push back in their direction again and say, hey, look, you guys commented on this thing, this is what we made out of it.
Yeah, that'd be a great way of engaging with
it. That kind of feedback loop, and otherwise we end up kind of taking lots of stuff, talk about it at some length, and then...
No, I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think, yeah, it's about getting back into that community. It seems to be a great community to be part of and something we want to do. So, yeah, putting together some paths and some actual advantages and things for all of this. So that sounds like a good plan. Is everyone sort of happy with that? Okay, so next week, if you can think ahead of which ones you want to sort of put together. If you get the time, just put together a few sample advantages. Don't need to do a whole path, because we can mix and match these ideas. And then we'll sort of crunch some of the mechanics next week and produce some good advantages from them. So, right, that's next week sorted out. Which means over to you, Pat, to deal with some pluses and deltas.
Well, I'll actually do Emily's first, because she told me to do it. Her pluses were she loved the Reddit response, and her deltas were that she had to run off and make dinner. Chris, what were your plus and delta?
Yes, the sheer variety, I think, of the Reddit responses. I think that this great thing about crowdsourcing is you get lots of different voices coming in from very different points of view. So I like that, and it's stuff I wouldn't have thought of. My delta, yeah, we didn't get time to throw in our own ideas, did we? Well, something we'll have to say for another day is actually thinking our own ones up.
Okay, Jay.
Yeah, pluses. Good to see a good response from Reddit. Good to see we're getting lots of good feedback on this. I think actually I've got to talk more about deltas. It would be nice if we could try and get some more 66 focus stuff going out. I think responding on what Mark was saying in terms of what we should be looking at next week, that should be quite good. It's also a shame that Google Plus is being a little bit quiet for us, because they do tend to come up with some nice and varied ideas. So yeah, well, a good Reddit response. But it'd be nice if we could try and get the momentum back with G Plus as well.
Yeah. Mark?
So, pluses. A range of things. It's good that we've kind of found another vein of ideas to tap and get interest from. It hadn't occurred to me to use anything like Reddit, really. Delta, where to put it? We haven't really kind of completed the real loop and actually started generating a lot of material based on this. I think, as Chris pointed out, in this particular meeting, we spent an awful lot of time talking about ideas other people had, rather than building up on them and trying to do something with that. And I think we should get more stuff of 66, more specific, onto Reddit, and see if that kind of changes our response. Maybe on a completely different thread with a different account name, so we don't kind of end up driving people away from doing this because they think, oh, they're just trying to sell us stuff. I'd be curious to give that a try and see what we get.
Yeah. Sorry for yawning there.
That's fine. I just thought you hated me.
Okay. Well, my pluses and deltas. Yeah, I'll say again, my delta is we didn't really get a chance to do any of our own stuff, and also I think I agree with Jay there. We need a bit more 66 mentioned on the Reddit rather than just what we're doing, because everything looked very other role-playing game. My plus is actually is almost entirely related to what we said today, but my plus is that I have now learned a trick of putting a massive treasure deposit entirely in coppers, and I'm going to use that in every game I run from now on. I think that's brilliant, but that's the kind of GM I am. Okay, that's me. So back to Chris, I guess.
Thank you, Pat, he says, unmuting his mic. Yeah, I think just to feedback on that, I think actually the last couple of weeks we've been actually a victim of our own success on Reddit, in that we had so many ideas, we sort of like didn't get time to do more specific 66 stuff. So yeah, next week we're going to do more specific stuff, so I'll have to think about how to phrase the post in a way which is going to allow people meaningful ways to engage with us, even if they don't know the system, but still keeps it useful for 66. So we'll have to think about. I'll have to think about that. I'll put together the post this week. I'll take responsibility for that. So yeah, that's great. I think we're done actually. So there's nothing really more to say than thank you for watching. We are back next Friday, 7 o'clock UK time. So it's goodbye from me, Pat, Emily, Mark, and Jay. Goodbye.
Bye.